Welcome, Sojourner Nation. Today I'd like to talk about calling, being called by the Lord. I have a question. Is every Christian called? Are they all called to minister? Are we all called to minister? Are we called to do different things? Or are some of us called and others we just volunteer, somebody ask? Well, I became a Christian um, a month before I turned 16. And when I was a little bit older in the youth group that I was in, there was several that they would go to. In the summer, they would go to youth camp uh, or kids camp if you were younger. And I remember, especially one time, you know, someone came back, and at that time, I think I was probably just out of school, um, either that or a senior, but I think I was out of school. I was still going to a youth group. It was very, very viable, strong youth group. The youth pastor had made a youth council and youth elders, and at that point, I was one of the elders. But I remember several coming back and saying that, at youth camp, they were called to go into the ministry. And I thought, wow, that is fantastic. And, I asked a few of them, it's like, well, how do you know what happened? Because I love the Lord. I, dove into his word and studied all the time. And, you know, we couldn't afford to go to youth camp or kids camp when I was growing up. So I never experienced that kind of thing. And you just know. You just know. Well, the youth group that I was in, like I said, the church was only probably around 200 people, but the youth group got to be even over 50. And I think there was one year that there was probably 7 or 8 former youth that were ordained from that church. There was a lot of pastors that came out of that small church. And yet I was like, Lord, why wasn't I called? You know, I mean, I went into worked at my father's upholstery shop for 5 years, and then later got into computers, and then had a career in computers, and took me kind of full circle to where I was, uh, you know, consulting in different companies, but then I ended up making my way to the Assemblies of God headquarters because a few people that I knew had worked there, and they encouraged me to stop by and see them when we were on vacation in Missouri. So I did, and then that led to me starting to work there. And that's why, 16, 17 years ago, I started getting a burden for seniors, and through that feeling that, you know, was what I feel was this calling to now try to encourage seniors to re engage with all the generations because, I look at it and, I really didn't like seeing uh, my parents or my in-laws, uh, the struggles that they had kind of in church, and when things changed or whatever, they would go to another church and then another church that, was more suited to somebody their age. Um, and it just bothered me, because it seemed like all sides were just kind of willing to let those relationships go. And I never understood that or got that. Well, anyways, back to the calling, it's something that I would mention and try to move forward, and feel this pull toward it. Nothing would happen, and I would let it go, and I'd forget about it literally for a few years. And then a sermon or something, or maybe just even the Holy Spirit would be bringing it back even stronger. And I would write a few more ideas down and, put more things, to paper. And I'd talk to a few people. And, of course, at that point, I wasn't even, considered a senior. I think this started when I was, you know, maybe early 50s or somewhere in there. I wasn't quite 55, and I really didn't consider 55 really as being a senior. Uh, but they say, well, at that point, you're starting to be part of their group. I don't know. I'm 65 now. I'll be 66 shortly, and I am feeling more part of the group, but just kind of. Anyways, as far as calling, how many of us that have had careers, how many of you out there is God tugging at your heart to do something? Something. I don't know. But I feel all along what the journey was that God had me go on was, in essence, a calling. It was preparing me for this, for what He would do later in my life. And I think, to answer the question that I posed earlier, I think we are all called. And you might be called to head up something, but you may be called to come alongside something. God puts it on your heart and doesn't let it go. And I'm praying right now for God to send the workers, and workers of all kinds, shapes, and everything. And I know that God is going to move. God is going to do some awesome things. And I don't know how I can't quantify that. I can't uh, put it down in logic like I would when I would be writing programs, but I know it. I just know that God has waited till this time to wake up the elephant in the room. I don't know if you realize it, but the fastest growing portion in society is seniors. There are more resources in the senior community. And yet, if you go out there and look for senior ministries, you know what senior ministry means? Ministering to seniors. Really. not us going and changing the world, not it being the seniors ministering to the world. Instead, it's, you know, yeah, we want you to pray for people, but let's just, sing some of the songs that we're used to singing. Let's encourage each other. What do we encourage each other for? We're in a battle. We are in a battle. I hope you realize that. And the enemy is taking our kids. And yet I don't see an urgency. I don't see a fire anywhere. There's some political, a little bit, but most of it is just, it's not my battle anymore. It is. It is. And we should be at the front of that. That doesn't mean we have to take our Bibles and thump people on the head. It means we need to love them. We mean to go out of our way and we have time. We have time. Was always so busy, 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 busy. And now, what are you busy with? What are you doing with your hands? What are you doing with your mind? What are you doing with your resources? He has called every one of you. And it may be just go out there and be part of this world. Go bless somebody. Go listen to somebody. Be part of society. Some of that may be learning new things, maybe learning new technologies. Those of us that are younger, maybe we should start reaching out and going to nursing homes. Maybe even bring a younger person that knows the technologies better than us and offer your services so that they can connect. So they can, how many I've heard stories of families that are buying their elderly parents these incredible smartphones. Their parents don't use it because they really haven't been given the time or shown the value of having that. And at the same time, those same parents will be upset because we're alone. We're alone. And in this day and age, nobody needs to be alone, like ever. It's time to wake up to what's in front of us. We are called. And we need to share with each other our callings, our successes, our failures. We need to come together as a community. Each of us fighting this battle by ourselves. It's not a very good strategy, for one. And two, that's not what God has called us to do. Before Jesus left us, one of the main things he prayed for is unity. And if it's not the oldest among us, it should be the oldest among us that push for unity the most, that do what it takes to unify and get rid of petty differences. And I heard a while back that the generation older than the boomer generation that I'm part of, I think it's called the silent generation. And I think about that, and I didn't realize that, and I wish I would have. How many stories could I have gotten from my father? But I never asked. So he never told them. I've got a few little fragments. And now I think about it, it's like, well, when we moved from here to there, what was that? What, you know, because I find out that I have a heritage that I know little or nothing about. I find out from my uncle when I went back to Minnesota with my mom several years ago that they had one of the most incredible healings at their little church. And I went online just recently and saw it, and I'm like, I had no idea. And that was at their church. And then their church was packed for quite a while. And did I even at that time ask my mom about it? I didn't. And there's other things that I should have asked my uncle that was a minister about his ministry. And there was a time, I think, that my mom and dad volunteered for it up in northern Minnesota. That would have been fantastic to find out about. But I never asked. So some of us that are younger and there's older ones around, we need to start asking about those stories. They shouldn't be lost. There is a thought I had a little while back too, now that I'm just sharing different things, is just like out there, I forget if it's called legacy or whatever it's called, and you can research your ancestry, and it's like, wow, that is pretty great that you can do that. And I thought, why don't we have my church legacy, where there's a place that we can go and research all these different churches and maybe plug in information we have of things that happen at those churches, so that later generations, if they come by and go, oh, I'm going to this church, well, oh, would you like to know what happened there in the 20s? or in the 1800s or even 20 years ago? That would be fantastic to hear those stories of what God has done in the place that you're standing now. There's so much we can do. So much we can do. Give me your ideas. There's a Facebook page, Sojourner Nation. You can subscribe to this channel. You can comment. Um, you know, you can get a hold of me, and let's do this thing. Let's make a difference. And if you don't feel that you are called, ask God, why are you here? What is your purpose here? You know, find out. Because there's a reason that He has you here. You're very valuable to Him. And you are the only one that can fit that exact piece of the puzzle that He has for you. And only you can do it. Like I've found over the years, I've always wanted to pass it off because it's like, well, I can't, who am I? Why can I can't do this? And it's like, this is what I'm calling you to do. You need to do it. If you don't, it doesn't get done. So each of you, do what God has you to do. Dear Lord, I ask that you bless and be with all of these elderly saints, myself included. Give us a burden again for the lost, like we had when we were younger. Help us see through your eyes. Help us to be your hands and your feet and your mouth to this lost and dying world. Help us to love like you love. Help us to be wise as you are wise. And we'll thank you and praise you for who you are, God all by yourself. Amen. Blessings.